Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. My name is Tracy Toulouse, and I'm the Director of the Office of Tribal Justice here at the Department of Justice. It's my pleasure to join our distinguished program speakers, DOJ senior leaders, and all of you here in the Great Hall, and those watching on Justice Television Network for the Department of Justice 2018 American Indian and Alaska Native Heritage Month observation. To begin our program, I'm going to ask you all to please rise for a traditional blessing, which will be provided by Darren Carrero, who's a trial attorney with the Environment and Natural Resources Division's Indian Resources Section. Darren?
Ababanili, Shalom Bish Ishto, Chinchukma Biliya, Nanamoma Ish Itana, Nanamoma Ish Bisa. Yakoke Chukmashki Natak Chukma, Yakoke Impa Chukma. Yakoke Hatuk Nakni Micha Hatuk Iho in Department of Justice Tuxali. Tuxali Chukma Popila. Yakoke Chukmashki Ho Hachi. Aho.
Okay, thank you, Darren. You can take your seats. At this time, I'd like to welcome our distinguished speakers. First, we are very fortunate to have with us the Honorable Rajay Rosenstein, Deputy Attorney General of the United States. Thank you for participating in the program today. Next, we are pleased to welcome John Tsuda, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs at the Department of Interior, and he'll be providing our keynote address. Thank you very much. Okay, at this point, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein. Initially, this task seemed a little pro forma. I think everyone here at the department knows the Deputy Attorney General's background. He graduated cum laude from Harvard while serving as an editor at the Law Review. Then he started at the department as an honors attorney in the Criminal Division's Public Integrity Section, went on to work as the counsel to the Deputy Attorney General, Special Assistant to the Assistant Attorney General for Crim, and as an Associate Independent Counsel. He then worked as a criminal prosecutor at the Maryland U.S. Attorney's Office for a number of years before returning to Maine Justice to serve as a Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Tax Division, finishing up with what I think may be an unprecedented 12-year run as a U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland. I've known the Deputy Attorney General for much of his career at Justice, but in looking at his bio in preparation for this introduction, I was reminded again about how deep his roots are here at the department. That long, diverse history at the department has been very important to the people we're here to talk about today, Native Americans. Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein's deep background in criminal law was critical in the department's ability to hit the ground running with programs designed to enhance Indian country public safety, such as the TAP program. From his time as an u.s.a, he understands the cooperation necessary between prosecutors and investigators, which facilitated work by the U.S. attorneys to strengthen relationships with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the DEA, and FBI through enhanced cross-training, and thus improve public safety on Indian reservation. While Baltimore is a very different place than most of Indian country, the U.S. Attorney for Maryland, as the U.S. Attorney for Maryland, he saw the corrosive effect that violence can have on a community. And as a result, his office has been instrumental in working with OJP, OVW, and COPS to improve access of tribal governments to prosecutors, police officers, and court services to better protect Native communities, particularly those who are most vulnerable, victims of child abuse and domestic violence. So it is with pleasure and appreciation that I introduce a man with deep roots here at the Department of Justice, whose experience enhances our work in Indian country, our Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to those of you who are with us in the Great Hall today, and also to those who are watching throughout the country on Justice Television Network. Very glad to have you with us here. I'm particularly grateful to Tracy Toulouse. Tracy and I, as he mentioned, first met probably close to 25 years ago. We were young attorneys in the criminal division working for Joanne Harris, who was the Assistant Attorney General for the criminal division, and then the acting Deputy Attorney General for several months. I'm very grateful to the employees of the Office of Tribal Justice and to Tracy for everything they do to promote public safety in Indian country, and also to those of you who I suspect were involved in relocating all these flags, which normally fly around the corner here on the second floor, and we're very glad to have them displayed now in the Great Hall today in commemoration of this occasion. I also want to thank everyone throughout the department who works to improve our relationships with tribes throughout the country and to further tribal justice, as well as those who work to create today's event. I did have violent crime challenges in Maryland. I did not have Indian country, and so we did not face the challenges that our U.S. attorneys do in many of our judicial districts in working with tribal law enforcement to combat violent crime and other criminal violations on Indian territory. It's a great privilege for me, though, to be here today to join with you in celebrating American Indian and Alaskan Native Heritage Month. I participated in quite a few Native American and Alaskan events with Tracy and with the Office of Tribal Justice over the past year and a half, and I've been very impressed with the effectiveness of this office in coordinating with tribes throughout the country. It's really a very valuable program, I think, in maintaining those relationships and in fostering public safety on Native Indian reservations and throughout Native American communities. The theme for the observation this year is sovereignty, trust, and resilience, which encourages us to reflect on the important contributions of Native Americans and Alaska Natives to the Department of Justice and to our nation's economic, academic, and cultural institutions. American Indians and Native Alaskans are an indispensable part of our national fabric. They are business owners, teachers, first responders, law enforcement officers, and community leaders. They serve with honor in our armed forces, and they work proudly with us here in the Department of Justice. President Trump said last month that Native Americans have fortified our country with their traditions and values, making tremendous contributions in every aspect of national life. We remain committed to preserving and protecting Native American cultures, languages, and history while ensuring prosperity and opportunity for all Americans. Consistent with the President's words, we recognize the many contributions and sacrifices by members of this community as we recommit ourselves today to ensuring opportunities for all Americans. Every American enriches the quality and character of our great country. The Department of Justice, as you all know, plays a unique role in government-to-government relations between the United States and tribal nations. Our 93 U.S. attorneys' offices and law enforcement components, such as the FBI and DEA, as well as ATF and the Marshal Service, are responsible for investigations, prosecutions, and victim services in the 51 judicial districts that include Indian country. Federal prosecutors exercise criminal jurisdiction over 250 distinct regions of Indian country, covering in total more than 55 million acres of land. Our offices work together with the tribal law enforcement, state and local law enforcement agencies, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs to improve safety and security for Native American and Alaskan Native communities. The department also handles a large caseload of civil litigation in Indian country. Our civil cases include matters relating to environmental and natural resource issues, tribal treaty rights, and Native American civil rights. Our grant-making components provided over $259 million to tribes just last year. Those components include the Office of Justice Programs, the Office for Victims of Crime, the Office on Violence Against Women, and the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services. Their grants support police, serve victims, combat domestic violence and sexual abuse, and strengthen tribal justice systems. We're particularly proud of what we call the Tribal Access Program, or TAP. That effort is coordinated by the Office of Tribal Justice and our department's Chief Information Officer. It provides computer kiosks that allow tribes to access federal crime databases. The kiosks allow tribes to protect victims of domestic violence, identify sex offenders, keep guns out of the hands of offenders, and help locate missing people. And there are many success stories involving these kiosks, which we continue to roll out throughout the country. Last year, the Gila River Police Department received a report about a sexual assault of a juvenile. Police quickly identified a suspect and a warrant issued, but the suspect had fled. Using a kiosk, the tribal police entered the warrant into the FBI's National Crime Information Center, which we call NCIC. NCIC is a computerized index of criminal justice information. One of its most important functions is to help police locate fugitives. If you can imagine the way the system used to work in the old days, you might have a warrant issued in one community, but if somebody happened to be stopped by a police officer in another jurisdiction, there'd be no way to know the person was wanted. NCIC allows us to bridge that gap by putting all warrants into a centralized information system, so police anywhere in the country can query that system and figure out whether somebody they encounter is wanted. Now, in this case, when the police first encountered the suspect outside tribal territory, an NCIC check revealed that warrant. The police took him into custody and transported him to the tribal jail, where he was booked using a federal workstation. Successes like that would not be possible without that kiosk system. Since that program started in 2015, 47 participating tribes have entered more than 600 sex offender registrations into the system. Participating tribes have also entered arrest data that prevents criminals from acquiring firearms. And tribes have conducted more than 4,500 fingerprint-based record checks for civil purposes, including employment. So this arms tribal law enforcement with the same kind of information that's available to federal, state, and local law enforcement outside of tribal territory. The total number of tribes with kiosk access will expand to 114 by the end of 2019. We're also proud of the department's new program to appoint special assistant U.S. attorneys to work on tribal issues. This initiative is funded through our Office on Violence Against Women. It hires prosecutors to bring cases in both tribal and federal courts. That increases our prosecution capacity and helps to prevent criminals from avoiding prosecution because of disputes or uncertainties about jurisdiction or sovereignty. It will promote the goal of ensuring that every perpetrator of domestic or sexual violence is brought to justice, no matter where in the country those crimes occur. These initiatives demonstrate our department's steadfast commitment to improving public safety in Indian country by promoting coordination among tribal, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. As part of our observance today, we are fortunate to have a guest speaker, John Tsuda. Mr. Tsuda is an enrolled member of the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Oklahoma State University and a law degree from Cornell Law School. Mr. Tsuda then worked as the acting general counsel of the Oneida Nation of New York. He also taught classes at Cornell Law School about federal Indian law, policy, and history. Mr. Tsuda later served as general counsel and legislative director of the Native Indian Gaming Association, the National Indian Gaming Association, where he monitored legislation and policy issues affecting the organization's 180 member tribes and assisted with their lobbying efforts. In 2002, Mr. Tsuda joined the staff of the U.S. Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, first as senior counsel and later as staff director. He handled policy and legislation affecting gaming, federal recognition, self-governance, and Indian health care. From 2007 until last year, Mr. Tsuda worked in the private sector, providing clients with advocacy and counsel services about tribal affairs policy issues. And last year, Mr. Tsuda was appointed as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs at the Department of the Interior. Indian Affairs manages federal trust, treaty, and other responsibilities for 573 federally recognized Indian tribes. Mr. Tsuda helps to develop and interpret policies affecting Indian Affairs bureaus, offices, and programs. He is a strong advocate for Indian country issues, and we are grateful to him for joining us today. Please join me in welcoming John Tsuda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm a little bit shorter than Mr. Rosenstein. Thank you, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, for a kind and generous introduction. And I want to say thank you to the department for the invitation to speak today. Thank you, Darren, for the invocation to get us started off with a good mind. And I really appreciate your opening remarks, Mr. Rosenstein, because I think that it highlights what really the theme that I was hoping to hit today as well. And I think you'll hear that hopefully as I talk here for a minute. about our two departments and how we work together, and how that has been one of the real pleasures for me, stepping back into public service and getting to work in the federal government again. So while I'm currently enjoying the opportunity to step outside of the lawyer's role specifically and view the world from a policymaker's role, and all of you lawyers, I would suggest you do it. It's a great chance to see the world from a different perspective. Certainly has given me a broader education in how to view the world. But despite that, I have spent most of my adult life as a lawyer. So coming here to the department, it's a very personal honor to me as well to speak with you today. And again, I want to express my appreciation for the invitation. Pardon me. Was there water? I missed. Sorry. Thank you. Most importantly, though, it's my honor to speak to you today, this month, as we Americans acknowledge the historic role that we, Native Americans, have played in the birth and growth of our nation, and that we proudly continue to contribute to our nation as we mature and grow as a democracy, as a vital and vibrant community nationally. I was really happy and excited at the opportunity last year and this year to have a little piece in the role of helping the President fashion his statement, his proclamation on Native American Heritage Month last year and this year. And I think it's really important, and again, it hits on the theme I hope to hit today, how his proclamation notes not just the importance of our heritage and our history that Native Americans have brought to this country as we've grown, but also the vitality that we continue to bring to it. And he mentions specifically, as we welcomed 6 new Indian nations into the federal family this year. And I think that's was a great point to note in his proclamation for the nation, so that everybody is aware that we're not just a piece of American history, but that we are a piece of America. As federal lawyers, we're constantly reminded of the foundational influences that our American Indian tribes have had on our American justice systems. The importance of these principles and influences ripple far outside of our federal Indian law context. Felix Cohen recognized this nearly 70 years ago when he famously wrote, "Like the miner's canary, the Indian marks the shifts from fresh air to poison gas in our political atmosphere, and our treatment of Indians reflects the rise and fall in our democratic faith." My role in the Department of Interior as an official that daily exercises the responsibilities over property and community on behalf of Indian tribes and individual Indians has refreshed that statement in my mind over the last year and a half. Whether or not you deal now with the arcane precepts of Indian law, we all at some point were schooled in the bedrock principles, as an example, the bedrock principles of real property laws on which our nation was founded, the principles which acknowledge and require us to acknowledge that the property rights of Indian tribes were there at the very beginning of our nation. These principles ground these property rights not only for our professional lives, but in a very real way. They're very relevant to our personal lives. The very house that I live in, that I own, is protected by those rights and principles, which were based on those foundational principles that this nation is founded on, and the property that we stand on. The unique opportunity to view historic actions taken by government agencies as old as this department, as old as the Department of Interior, has also given me some perspective on how we view something like property. Over the expanse of 100 years or more, certain legal trends can be seen. And again, it's been really an educational experience. I would call it fun for me as we go through looking at the history of decision-making within the department and to see it unfold over 100 years and how the department's views have changed over time. So we also see the legal trends that are influenced by the political winds over time begin to shift. Nearly always, the respect or the lack thereof, again as an example, the respect or lack thereof for property rights of Indian people precedes a change in the views of the general sanctity of property rights in our country. As an example, late in the 19th century, we saw a willingness to disregard the wishes of tribal property owners in pursuit of a national need or a perceived greater good. Eventually, this led to an acceptance that the federal government could force property owners to give up their rights for something like a greater good or national need, or even devolving into just an economic need. Conversely, over the past several decades, we've seen a reemergence of the notion of the sanctity of property in our culture, in our society. Property ownership, not just for tribal owners, and we saw that reemerge in the 60s and 70s as tribes were reasserting their rights to their land, their reservations. We've seen it more recently as a pushback in general against the exercise of government power to appropriate property for some perceived short-term economic or public good. I didn't really intend to overly dwell on property rights. It's just been fresh on my mind. At Interior, we handle a lot of property, as you might guess. But there are other areas in which the legal structures of tribal communities have been leading the way as well, expanding how we as a nation think about our legal structures. One of those areas of relevance to us today, both at our department and yours, and as lawyers, is the notion of the larger pursuit of justice in our communities. As a nation of laws and a vibrant democracy, America is awakening to the need for a broader view of justice, realizing that truly experiencing fairness and justice in our communities requires an understanding of the history of our communities. The understanding of each community's history can open our eyes to a path to healing that community, which in real-world terms means reducing recidivism, juvenile crime, domestic violence. Again, tribes have been the canary leading the way. Tribes have been pursuing greater community fairness and justice ever since they've been encouraged to exercise or re-exercise their powers of self-government. Restorative justice, community healing, they're not just catchwords that we throw out. Everybody is using them now. And really, they're descriptors of how the use of tradition and culture can provide enduring peace and justice in a community. I wanted to point out these two particular legal themes this afternoon because I think they're illustrative of the importance of our two agencies in the federal-tribal relationship. I've had the opportunity to work with many of you, whether protecting treaty rights, water resources, or just as importantly, protecting the sanctity of family and community. I believe, or if you believe my analogy of the canary is apt, then you will also believe that our complementary roles, or should I say our partnership, is an important contribution to our nation at large, not just the Indian nations, but our nation. I'm very proud to have had the opportunity to do that. I look forward to doing it more. Before I close, I also wanted to share my personal appreciation for your law enforcement efforts in our Native communities. As many of you know, under Secretary Zinke's leadership, the Department of the Interior has been leading the charge to stem the opioid, meth, and drug epidemics that has hit Indian country. I'm proud of our team, their outstanding work, the efforts they've brought into the communities as we are trying to help them rebuild themselves. Yet those efforts would largely be for naught without your efforts side by side with us to bring criminals to justice, to bringing them to trial, and removing them from our communities. This is also very near and dear to my heart, as I lost a very close family member to the mindless, soulless criminality that these drugs bring into our communities. I am forever grateful to our team and our partnership with you in the effort to bring this scourge to an end. It's worth the cost, whether it's one family or many, and it's been a great privilege of mine working with our team, working with your teams, to see that some families have been put back together, some families have been saved, and I hope that our efforts pay greater fruit in the near future in that front. Thank you to everyone in this room for taking the time to learn about our nation's Native heritage this month and every month. Whether you work on Native issues or not, I hope that you've had a chance to learn a little bit more about the history of your country, because this is all our country. Thank you to all of you that I've had the privilege to work with, and I sincerely look forward to working with more of you and your colleagues in the near future. thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. On behalf of the department, Secretary Zinke, again, I sincerely express my appreciation for your efforts, your partnership with us, and trying to bring a safer and better Indian community forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tsuda, for your educational and inspirational remarks. At this time, the Deputy Attorney General is going to present a small token in the front of our appreciation. At this time, I want to invite Richard Toscano, Director of the Equal Opportunity and Employment and Opportunity Staff, to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, and good afternoon, all. Many thanks once again to our distinguished speakers, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, Principal Deputy Secretary Tsuda, and of course, Tracy Toulouse. I'd also like to extend a special thanks to Mr. Carrero for the traditional blessing, as well as to Granette Trent and Sylvia Price of the JMD-EO staff for coordinating today's program. Throughout the month of May, several DOJ components have held similar programs to observe American Indian and Alaska Native Heritage Month, and as part of their overall efforts part of their overall work to raise awareness of the department's diverse workforce and their contributions to the DOJ mission. All DOJ employees are invited to attend these special observance programs and other affirmative employment activities that are coordinated by the JMD EEO staff and DOJ EEO component offices throughout the year. Affirmative employment plays a critical role in helping to ensure equal employment opportunity for all and to fostering a diverse workforce and inclusive work environment across DOJ. Before you leave today, I ask that you please complete the evaluation form that was placed in your chair. Your feedback will help the JMD-EEO staff to plan future department-wide observance programs. You may leave the completed evaluation form in your chair or give it to a member of the JMD-EEO staff who will be at the entrance of the Great Hall. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to those DOJ employees who are viewing on JTN. This concludes our program. Have a great day.